Good afternoon, everybody. We want to welcome you to our SafetyTek Expansion webinar. This is our fourth webinar of our coverage. I want to introduce myself. I'm Ben Brown, here with Maggie Hammett. I want to let everybody know that this webinar is going to be strictly on our SafetyTek Expansion endorsement that we offer with our coverage. And I also want to encourage questions at the end. There's quite a bit of information, there's quite a bit of coverage that we give in this endorsement, and if you guys have a question or anything comes up, please feel free to let us know. Get started. First, I want to kind of give a brief little rundown of what we're going to discuss, and kind of give you a background of the development and kind of how the SafetyTek Expansion endorsement came to be. I'm going to give definitions of the coverage and how the policy wording defines coverage, give examples of why this coverage, this enhancement is important, kind of let you know where everybody is from a competitive standpoint, what are other carriers offering, what aren't they, a little bit of the cost, and then as usually we're going to have a question and answer session. First, a little bit of background and development. Ducking Company, we've had our program, SafetyTek program, for over 15 years. Been underwriting technology professionals, technology risks. We have experience, all of us here have experience, Ducking Company as a whole has experience underwriting professional risks. Because of that, a lot of the coverage that went into that also came into the expertise we have looking at other risks. Here shortly you'll realize what I mean by that. Because the expansion endorsement includes coverage for what can be defined as quote-unquote non-tech type services, it's nice that we realize that technology companies have expertise in other areas other than just quote-unquote simple technology services. Also, we at Ducking Company have a very in-depth understanding of the contracts that insureds run into with their clients. So that all went into building of this expansion or enhancement endorsement. So what is the SafetyTek Expansion endorsement? I noticed some of you have worked with us before, probably pretty familiar, at least heard of or seen SafetyTek Expansion endorsement being quoted, given, may have asked questions about it. What is it? What does it do? What it does is basically for one filed rate for one little coverage agreement, basically get all of what is given there. So what it does is it brings in management consulting services, telecommunications services, IT staffing and placement services, along with giving innocent insured coverage, bringing back contractual liability, and then also granting defense outside the limits and first dollar defense coverage. All of these are in one form all together. You get all of them. If you get one, you get all of them, and it's for 10% additional premium. So really quick to define management consultants. A lot of these firms, these technology firms, go into their client's office or go into their clients in general and offer them a service, but then at the end they also give kind of some guidance as to and some consulting as to where to go with what they just gave them. They don't want to provide them a service and then walk away and say, here you go, figure it out. No direction as to how to obtain their goals, no direction as to how they need to, what strategies to take. None of that. They don't want to do that. That wouldn't be good practice. So typically, when you see a management consultant, quote unquote management consultant, most would immediately think of miscellaneous professional liability form. What we have done is come up with and realize that these tech firms need a lot more, or could use and make this viable to including this automatically bringing in these management consulting services. That is the definition of those services there. Telecommunication services. Again, a lot of these tech guys, they may be doing work for or with call centers. They may be doing telecommunications consulting in general, working with cabling and internet service. All of these things, a technology form may not define, telecommunication services may not be in other competitors' definition of covered services. Once again, we went through, looked at what we were seeing, what the need was based on the industry and what we were running into, and it was a lot easier and was definitely going above and beyond by adding services in. IT staffing and placement. Once again, this is one of those where maybe only a small percentage of the services offered by an insured is IT staffing, or maybe it's 100% of what they do. Either way, we bring that coverage in automatically. It's an extension of the covered services. Once again, the definition is pretty cut and dry, pretty straightforward. The definition is very in-depth as defining what an IT staffing and placement firm is and should be, automatically included and brought in. I wanted to go ahead and show you basically what the form automatically includes, defines a technology service. And you can see there that management consulting, telecommunications in there for the hardware installation. However, the telecommunication coverage in the SafetyTek expansion brings out much more services offered and encompasses much more than a telecommunication service. Along with IT staffing, you won't find IT staffing in. Now on to the innocent assured coverage. Most carriers that we've run into, including ourselves, have an automatic standard, it's a standard exclusion in their form that basically excludes an innocent assured, any wrongful acts that are committed from fraudulent, dishonest, criminal type charges. They're automatically excluded. What we've done is realize that, hey, things happen. May not be able to control a ex-employee. May have an employee that goes, the term is typically deemed rogue, a rogue employee, someone who you employ or maybe contract out, work with, goes in and does some sort of act, commits fraud, some sort of criminal activity, malicious, whatnot. A good example of this would be, say you're a network design firm. You have designed a network and you administer a network for a federal agency. One night, one day, whenever, one of your employees goes in, and because they work for you and have access to it, they were able to go in and they change passcodes, They change access codes. They change everything needed for that agency to be able to function properly, run that network is now changed and locked, where that rogue employee is only the one that has access to that. That would be a good example of what has been seen and how this coverage is valuable. Contractual liability. Again, contractual liability coverage for a breach of contract. Pretty much every carrier is excluded. It's standard exclusion put on basically because the carrier doesn't want to pick up any breach of contract, any warranty or guarantee that you have given or you have signed between yourself or between an insured and the insured client. Kind of hard for a carrier to know and understand and check and look at all of those. However, some of your insured clients may have in their contract that you need breach of contract coverage, and they require breach of contract coverage. Without noticing that or seeing that, it's kind of hard to know whether they have that or that provision is in there. However, because we've seen these contracts over and over again, and we came up with basically this coverage, this contractual liability coverage that brings back and amends that exclusion to cover breach of contract. First dollar defense. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard this, heard it tossed around. Many carriers offer this. It's not an uncommon coverage. However, a lot of times it is very misunderstood, and it is not understood as how valuable it is for your insured to have, not only by itself, but also with your contractual liability, adding in those other services, and also defense outside the limits. We'll get to it here in a second. I kind of want to go through and make sure everybody understands and knows what first dollar defense is. I know in my experience, I've had it explained to me 4 or 5 different ways. Unfortunately, it's one of those things that, like I said, is widely sometimes misunderstood. However, the way first dollar defense works is exactly what it says. The deductible only applies or does not apply to defense costs. What does that mean exactly? Let's just say you have an insured and they have litigation for whatever reason, some sort of wrongful act, and they swear to you that, and they say, I didn't do anything, not my fault, I didn't do it. However, it's being defended and goes to court and rattles around, and somehow $75,000 is racked up in court costs and defense costs and everything else, and at the end of the litigation process, it's found that it was not the insured's fault, it was somebody else's fault, or it was thrown out, or whatever. That insured will not be obligated to pay anything. There was no indemnity payout. There was nothing. No court settlement was made that demanded them pay any sort of costs or any sort of financial obligation to whoever the person that filed the claim is, or firm that filed the claim, or whatever they were accused of. There will be no financial burden to your insured whatsoever with coverage. Defense outside the limits. This is another one. It's pretty cut and dry. Once again, many carriers offer this as more of a standalone type buyback option. Very few offer it in conjunction with first dollar defense, innocent insured, and contractual liability coverage. What's given there is the definition of defense outside the limits as it is defined in the endorsement. What defense outside the limits means say your insured has a $500,000 occurrence and aggregate limit, and they have a suit that is being filed. That suit goes through court and is stretched out over a year and ends up racking up $400,000 in defense costs, and only ends up coming to maybe $25,000 in indemnity payout. Those defense costs are not included in the total occurrence and aggregate limit. The only thing that is included are the indemnity payouts. The competition that is out there from other carriers and the cost that's out there, as I said, I don't know of any carriers that have this quote-unquote bundle of coverage that we offer together all in one. Coverage is out there. There are usually options that are separate. Each has its own additional premium associated with it. For us, like I said, all of what has been shown here is included in the SafetyTek Expansion endorsement altogether for typically a 10% additional charge. Our minimum premiums start as low as $750. Unfortunately, in the state of New York, we cannot offer defense outside the limits. We can look at first dollar defense, add all those. We can add the IT staffing. We can add them all in. We cannot give defense outside the limits. Contact, Dwight's contact, Maggie's contact, my contact info. Anytime you guys have a question, have a risk you want us to look at, anything whatsoever, a website, hey, I think this guy may need professional liability, anything, feel free to let us know. I do want to point out that 90% of the risks that we see, given they're not in New York or something like that, 90% of those risks qualify and have automatically included SafetyTek Expansion endorsement along with our other coverage agreements that we included in previous 3 webinars. There are a couple little rules, I guess, that we have and guidelines and stipulations that we need to stick to. Risks that have over $3 million in billings, revenues, need to be, doesn't mean that they won't apply for SafetyTek. It just means you need to refer them to the carrier, to ACE, have them look over and approve. Typically, we don't have a problem with it as long as the proper procedures are in place. The expansion endorsement is only available through with a $25K and below deductible. Any risk over 3 that is requesting 3 mil limits, aggregate, and occurrence will need to be referred. Typically don't have a problem with that as long as the proper procedures are in place. And as we said, it's not available in New York with all of those bundled together. We have to look at each one individually, minus the defense outside the limits. Now I'd like to invite everyone to ask any questions or run through if you came up with something or something wasn't clear. If you need us to go back and look at anything, revisit it, please ask us a question. If you think of something a little later, once again, feel free to ask Maggie and I, drop us a call, send us an email, anything, anytime. Anybody have any questions? Yes. Someone's asking if we have a copy of the endorsement. definitely send out. We can send out actually a full specimen of the forms if you would like. It'll include the SafetyTek Expansion endorsement, and it'll also include our other 3 coverage agreements that we have. Definitely do that. We probably could send that out to everybody with a copy of the slides once we're done here. Anybody have any more questions? All right. Doesn't look like really anybody has any more questions. Once again, come up with anything, please feel free to email us or let us know. And we're going to send out a copy of the slides, and we'll send out the form with it. I want to thank everybody for joining, and you guys have a good night, good day.